Welcome to a special edition of Eternal Media's Recovery Hub podcast. So, it feels like a bit of payback today. As David and Wulf have interviewed me so many times, and it's my turn to ask all the questions. It seems that they know quite a lot about me, and now I get to ask the questions. David's come all the way from Australia. Oh, Alex is with us as well.
Hi.
Representing...
North Wales Recovery Community.
Okay, over in the West. David.
Yes.
Tell us about you. What do you do?
Well, I guess I've been on a long journey. I guess it started my third year at uni in London. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help people. On the one side, there was clinical psychology. Do I go that way? And the other side was brain science, neuroscience. And for some reason, I went down that way to neuroscience.
Wow.
I thought we could solve mental health problems by playing around with brain chemicals. Of course, I wasn't an expert to make that judgment at that time, because all I knew was what I was reading and a very passionate lecturer. But that took me to 24 years of being in neuroscience.
What made you want to help people? Was it a calling? Was it an experience you've had when you were younger, or?
I've always wondered where it started. I've no idea. I often thought back to that. But over time, it became clearer. When I started to meet people in recovery, people who'd come through so much adversity and then wanting to go on and help others, it became a calling then. I'm just amazed at how people can overcome such adversity. And I like the underdog. It's just something that's built inside me. I don't know where this came from. And I realized when I was a neuroscientist after 20 odd years that actually I wasn't helping anyone, and I didn't know any neuroscientist was actually helping anyone overcome addiction. So we had a whole science there. And we had an organization in America which gets $1.6 billion a year saying that addiction was going to be solved by scientists and treatment practice.
It's had a revival, hasn't it, recently?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's propping up the biomedical side.
So, from a neuroscientist, I have no idea what that looks like in your day job. What does that look like, a day job for you?
Okay, so I was working in university. Well, I did my PhD working with laboratory rats. And then I had the opportunity to go and work with the father of dopamine, which most people know that dopamine's an important neurotransmitter in the brain. And he went on to win the Nobel Prize, and one of the most inspiring people I've ever met, and someone who treated you as an equal. And then I went off and...
Sorry, who was that?
This is a guy called Arvid Carlsson.
Right.
So I spent 3 years in Sweden working with Arvid. He was the first person to point out that Parkinson's disease was due to a deficit of dopamine. He also played a major role in schizophrenia research and eventually won the Nobel Prize in 2000 for his work. So after I left Sweden, I worked in the States for a couple of years, and then I won an award to come back to the UK and set up my own research laboratory, which again was working with laboratory rats because they were our model for psychiatric and neurological disorders. And I did that from 86 to 2000 before I woke up.
So from working with rats in a lab, when did you first meet somebody in recovery? What were the circumstances about your first step meeting people in recovery?
Yeah, I met some people who worked in a treatment agency in Swansea called WCADA, West Glamorgan Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse. And they were just so passionate about what they were doing. Amazing people. Two of them, Dave Watkins and Keith Morgan, are still such great friends today. And Keith was in recovery himself. Dave, I had a family member who had a problem. And just their passion and then meeting. I'd never met an addict. I came from a world where one of my colleagues basically said that people with an addiction problem, they had fucked up brains. There was that sort of level of reductionism, really, in the neuroscience world. So it all became much clearer when I started to meet my first people with a drug problem. And I always remember a girl I call Natalie, who was very beautiful and was a former heroin addict. And she explained to me that she could never find out any information on how to get rid of her problem. There were no stories out there. She said, don't assume that all heroin addicts don't have access to the internet. I had access to the internet and I hunted for information. Couldn't find anything, so I just knew that I had to keep going as I was going. And all my concerns, of course, were killed off when I took some more heroin. And I had started to get very interested and I wanted to do something. And she said to me, if you want to help people, tell our stories. And 20 odd years later, 24 years later, I'll be seeing her when I'm down in South Wales. And we've continued writing her story over the years. And she's 20 plus years in recovery. Amazing woman.
So you're nodding quite a bit there, Wulf.
Yeah.
So do you know the same people?
I've met Natalie, and I was first, not at the same time as David, but I probably first had contact with people in Wakada we're going back over 20 years as well, and I was only in Wakada 3 weeks ago when I was last down in Swansea, although they don't call it Wakada anymore, because of course it's part of the Fairy Ad group now. Yes. Yeah, so I know some of the story. I mean, we didn't know each other at that point in time, but I know those stories, and I know I've been with or in contact with David almost the whole time he's been doing the storytelling, really, which has been amazing.
So people who might not have heard your interview on the Hub, can you tell us what you do?
I'm now a professor of alcohol at the newly named Wrexham University, because we've obviously jumped on the Hollywood bandwagon with everybody else and changed our name from Glyndŵr to Wrexham. So I primarily do research for a living, all to do with alcohol and drugs, anything to do with social policy, service evaluation and stuff like that. I'm a registered and qualified social worker, and I spend whatever time I can supporting my local recovery community, which just happens to be the one that Alex works for at the moment.
Yeah, and you're a trustee of that charity, aren't you?
I'm about to become a trustee.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I've never been a trustee before, but there's been a bit of a plea if I can become a trustee. So I've just signed the trustee papers last week, and will become a trustee.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In time. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a kind of little
Do
bit
you
of a tug.
want another charity? Do you want another trusteeship? I've got a slot for you.
I used to have a chair of 3 or 4 charities, and particularly the charity I spent most time being chair of, and you probably will have both heard of it, David won't have, but that's Abbey Road. So I used to be chair of Abbey Road for about 10 or 12 years, a mental health charity.
Yeah, that's Mind.
Mind and stuff. And I just forswore that I wouldn't do any more be chair of charities, because being a chair of a charity is, it's a complete commitment. Once you say you're going to do it, you're supporting everyone from top to bottom. The people need to access the service, the volunteers, the staff. You need to. But just recently, I've had 2 charities this year come to me and say, "Look, will you please help us at a trustee level?" So one is one that I used to chair, and I'm bailing them out for a year while they work out how to close themselves.
So how did you guys meet? Because you kind of thick as thieves nowadays, thick as thieves. I think that's the term. You're very much entwined in what you're doing together. And what are you doing together nowadays?
Maybe start with how we got together.
Yeah.
There's an interesting little story there, because
if you've got any questions, jump in. But
okay.
Yeah,
you're asking the ones I want to know.
Good.
How did you meet, gentlemen?
All right, I'll tell you. There's a little backstory to it as well. So we're back in 2000. I just got my professorship. You give an inaugural talk and a dinner. And I had decided to close my neuroscience laboratory, and the university was going to lose a lot of money.
The rats were glad about that.
Yeah, the rats were glad. The university wasn't, because they got a lot of overheads because they had a lot of research grants. And so I made the announcement during my inaugural talk and explained that I was going to be able to move from having a readership which was only academics to trying to get a readership via the internet, which was much wider. It covered from parents of people with drug problems and people with drug problems themselves to policymakers, etc., etc. And around that time, I put in for a bid to evaluate a drug and alcohol treatment fund program in Wales, and we got the bid. So he was someone from a completely different background who was now going to look at services, and maybe people would say, well, what would you know about that sort of thing? But there's a lot of common sense involved in it. And what I saw was, having done that for 2 years, was a system which wasn't really working very well at all. And it was quite disillusioning. And but there was one real highlight. We'd go around and visit services and everything, and we had a local evaluator in each area. And we had a lovely lady called Annie Stonebridge for North Wales. And so myself and my assistant would come up to North Wales, and the highlight was always meeting this man, because here was a man with absolute clear passion, different to a lot of practitioners that I met. And he also got out of his office and went to meet people where they were at.
Yeah, took them up mountains and...
Well, no, there was no. I don't think we talked mountains at that stage. He may have been doing.
Is this 2000 now? We're still.
Yeah, this would be about 2000. So it was about 2 years we popped up and saw you.
Yeah, in the very early 2000s. So David's meeting us along Prince's Drive, where the Dawn Centre was, and you know Prince's Drive well.
For another reason?
Well, yeah, there was well, it's more of a hostel really, but it was dressed up as a rehab called T12, Shares 12.
Yeah. So Marcus was next door to us in that sense.
So I may have walked past you.
Probably. It's 2005. This was, and 2008, I think.
Oh, okay. No, we were earlier. Yeah, and so we were always very passionate about meeting Wulf, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't think we saw each other for a number of years, did we?
Not for a number of years after that. But it was this same common principle, realising that the system itself was not doing enough. You can use lots of analogies, but it always kind of felt like that system was designed to just kind of sober people up, patch them up, and then just chuck them back out into them. It wasn't actually achieving much at all, was the common thing that we talked about. I was manager for Kais at that point in time. I didn't bother to ask people for the paper. If I wanted to know what was going on, I just would get off my arse and go in a room full of people and ask people. And it was quite scary for people at times, because I just go to people, I say, I'm going to know whether you're doing a good job or not. And they said, well, how? Well, so I'm going to talk to the people that you're working with, and they'll tell me whether you're doing, it's simple as that, like, you know. If I want an honest answer, I'm going to go and ask the drug user, I'm not going to ask you, like, you know. But people weren't doing that, were they?
No. And of course, I was also hearing from some of the people who were visiting services. And one of the most common things I heard was they don't know anything about addiction, it's just textbook stuff. I was really quite surprised, because I was very trusting. You know, I'd gone into this field and trusted I was going to be amongst experts, and soon realised that this wasn't the case. And I was also hearing that very few people knew much about it, which was really surprising. And at the same time, there was this thing, treatment works, whatever that means. So, and also the fact that I soon realised that this isn't about someone helping you get better. It's about what you yourself are going to do. But you need people around you to help you do that. So I set up this initiative called Wired In, which is very much a grassroots.
I remember Wired In.
Yeah. Set up a charity, Wired International Limited. And it was all about empowering and connecting people. And to us, empowerment was about giving people hope, giving them an understanding of addiction and recovery, and giving them a sense of belonging. And so that was what I was doing. You know, I was spending my time doing teaching students, obviously, but otherwise working in the community. And we were telling stories, doing research, evaluation, and it went on from there.
I remember filming in Glasgow Was that the Recovery Foundation or Federation?
Recovery Academy.
Was it Recovery Academy? David something, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's his name?
David Best?
Yeah. Yeah. Were you?
No, that was the 2009 one, because James thought he'd met me and said he was really grateful for that. And I was thinking, I did give a talk in Glasgow, but that was about 2005 or
Yeah, it wasn't it the same thing that...
No, because I'd moved to Australia in 2008.
Got you.
I know I was coming back.
And we worked out yesterday, didn't we? It was the year after you went away when the Glasgow event was, and there was that first big march in Glasgow.
Film.
So that would be David Best.
Yeah.
Just wondering if you wired in and what David was doing, if there was any connection there.
No, David and I were in communication, and David was working at some stage in Melbourne as well, and I was in Perth. So I was running Wired In we launched the Wired In online community at November 2008. And by then I knew I was moving to Australia for personal reasons. So I then ran it from there for 4 years and periodically coming back.
And David was doing something called he was part of a group of 7 or 8 people who were running something called the Recovery Academy.
So you were a neuroscientist that after many years came to the conclusion that addiction cannot be addressed through neuroscience. It cannot be helped. There's no benefit to it. There was nothing beneficial in trying to change.
I mean, there are certain things that we do know where there's a biological, medically oriented thing, and that is one of the things that the brain does. So, give you some amphetamine.
I'm really interested.
Okay. So what happens is, if I give you amphetamine, the primary effect of amphetamine is to increase release of dopamine.
Right.
In different areas of the brain. Okay, in all areas of the brain. But the brain is always trying to compensate, always trying to bring something back to normal. So what would happen is the receptors themselves, because they're now getting stimulated more, would become less sensitive. There's a compensation to that. So trying to bring it back to normal. Now, this is going on. The more amphetamine you have, the more this is going on. But then the amphetamine disappears out of your body. But the receptors don't change back as quickly. So that is why when the amphetamine is gone, your receptors are now less sensitive, but they've not got the increased dopamine on it, that you start to have a low. And the same thing happens, say, with alcohol or benzodiazepines. The receptors are changing, and the more you have the drug, the more these things are going on. So then you can start to have very pronounced effects, psychological effects arising from having the changes that have gone on long term.
Is all dopamine the same? Is dopamine dopamine?
Dopamine is dopamine, but dopamine projects from one area of the brain to a variety of forebrain areas.
Because my question is, if dopamine is dopamine, if you're taking LSD, does that release dopamine?
No, that's primarily
okay. So if you're looking at cocaine,
yeah,
right, cocaine, heroin,
influences indirectly.
So cocaine and amphetamine, if they both release, create dopamine, why do they feel different?
Okay,
different effects.
Well, cocaine is slightly different on what it's doing with dopamine. It's actually preventing it being taken back up into the neuron. Okay, but at one level that's irrelevant. The thing is cocaine is acting on other neurotransmitter systems, but to try and relate psychological experience to what's going on in the synapse is extremely difficult. And that's where something like the National Institute of Drug Abuse in America has simplified it all. Drugs hijack your brain. It's just bullshit. They don't hijack your brain, because it's not just what's going on at that synaptic level. And also, we know very little of how chemical effects in different parts of the brain relate to human consciousness.
I've got another question.
Go on then.
Right. If we're kind of not meant to be taking cocaine, heroin, or all these other stimulants, chemicals, why does the brain have receptors for them? Those
transmitter systems are basically controlling our behavior. But basically everything we do as human beings comes down to electricity along the neuron and chemicals being released. Okay, and that's at a very simplistic level. If you take 3 major dopamine systems, you've got one which is we know absolutely is involved in motor control, because if you lose 95% of those neurons, you will get Parkinson's disease. You've got one area involved in motor control, you've got one area, the cortex involved in cognition, and you've got another area involved in emotional reactivity. Okay. So you give a drug, you're influencing all of those. If you give amphetamine, it's not saying, oh, I'm only going to act on this sort of thing. But we know what sorts of behaviors those areas of the brain actually control, but you still can't relate that to human experience and consciousness. There's no simple explanation. But we tend to simplify things, and we talk about dopamine is your reward transmitter. That's just bullshit.
And serotonin is?
All sorts of things. Let's put it this way. People say that serotonin is involved in depression. You got one set of experiments that shows that serotonin is too low, and that's why you get depression, and you get another that says there's too much.
Hasn't it become more complicated or more simplified in the way in which people like NIDA, the National Institute of Drug and Alcohol Abuse, you're talking about use, because it's used really to want to defend 2 or 3 really important positions in the drug and alcohol world, and that's the bit that makes it messy. It's used to inform one position, particularly in America, where they want to say, if we can crack this stuff by brain scanning, we'll be able to work out who is or isn't going to develop, some kind of bonkers notion that we can scan you to work out where the rest of all of your life's going to, So that's one of the arguments that gets done, isn't it? The second one, of course, it's used is to support the pharmacological industry.
Absolutely. I remember something in relation to that, because when I was working in Sweden, and for the initial years when I went to UK, we were very much working towards mental health. And then there was not much funding for that in the UK. It all suddenly became very trendy, and it was addiction to shift to that sort of research. We had some drugs in Sweden that we developed, and they only seemed to affect the sort of cognitive parts of the brain rather than the motor parts. So the chances were that these were going to be side effect free in human beings. Okay. The other really interesting thing is psychosis is supposed to be excessive dopamine. So you block with a dopamine blocker to reduce the symptoms. And Parkinson's is too little, and you need L-DOPA to give more. But our drugs actually worked in both models, and that's because they're called what we call partial agonists. And depending on the state of the receptor sensitivity, they could either be an agonist or an antagonist. This was revolutionary, and drug companies around the world were following this. And a couple of years later, I was doing some work for a drug company in Holland, and the guy said to me, English guy, and he said, look, David, he said, I know you've done all this work and you've got these ideas about how we can produce a non-side effect free antipsychotic. And he said, really doesn't matter. The really key people are the marketing people. Our marketing people will tell you it's side effect free, even if it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that was another little turning point in my life as to why am I doing what I'm doing. But no, big pharma, it's huge.
So you've become quite disillusioned in what you're involved with there, and yourself, Wulf, you were kind of becoming quite disillusioned in...
Well, I'd always struggled with the treatment system because I'd never fitted. That was the bizarrest thing, I qualified as a social worker. I couldn't get a job as a social worker. It was one of my problems. No one would employ me. And then I went for an interview with Ian Wardle from Lifeline, who was running this street-based drug charity where everyone who was working had got experience of drug use. And I went and did my interview, and he just went, oh yeah, you can come and work for us, you'll be fine.
That's where you had to wear a tie.
No, I did have to wear a tie for him. The one time I wore a tie was him. But it was just like, and I never fitted in. I realised I never fitted in afterwards. I had these experiences. I remember being in one meeting around the time I met David, I was in one meeting, and everyone in the room was supposed to be there because they were invited to be. They were managers of drug services and alcohol services. That's why you were in the room. And I opened my mouth, and there were 3 senior nurses from the health authority who just went, "You can't talk about this. You're not qualified to speak." And I was quite speechless for a bit. It was quite an angry thing at one point in time. I had to go away and think, well, what did they mean I was not qualified? And I couldn't work out which judgment they were making on me, whether I wasn't qualified because I didn't have a medical qualification, whether I wasn't qualified because I did have a qualification, but it was a different qualification to them and therefore it didn't matter, you know. I had a master's in alcohol and a social work qualification, but that didn't matter to them. Or the fact that I was some long-haired, scruffy git and they were all there in suits and tie and therefore I wasn't qualified. Or I was the only one in the room that confessed to having used shits a load of drugs and they had neither. And I couldn't work it, you know. That was, and for the rest of my time, I never fitted in that system. And what I realised in a very different way to David is that actually I'd come to the conclusion that that system, and I don't want to dismiss the treatment system because I think people do at critical moments in their life, they need a detox. There's no doubt about it. People need to go to rehab. You know, some people need to take some opioid substitute therapy at some point in time. But anyone who wants to tell me that that's the be all and end all of getting your life back, it became really obvious that it was best the start. Yeah, and so I became equally as disillusioned and realised I didn't fit, yes?
I was the same. After a while, I began to realise that, A, the system wasn't working properly. That concerned me, and I wasn't frightened. Somewhere along the line, this trusting thing and thinking, you know, these people, wow, this world that they're in, I realised that this wasn't as smart as I originally thought, and I wasn't frightened to challenge.
So I had my first drug and alcohol counsellor, who was actually the lady who got up on stage in our school a couple of years earlier, who told us about the dangers of drugs, and she ended up being my drug and alcohol counsellor a couple of years later. And back then, they'd give me litres of methadone to go home with, and I had so much, I didn't know what I was giving it for, I didn't know. So I've kind of been involved in drug and alcohol agencies, or back then it was called community drug and alcohol, something like that. It was in Northwich. But it was all about scripting. Yeah. I didn't really talk about getting you off anything. It wasn't really about that. And then throughout the years, you know, I moved around many, many places because I burnt towns out through crime. I just had to keep moving. But in each one, when I was around long enough to actually be there for an appointment that they set me weeks after I went for help, they never talked about recovery. I hadn't heard recovery until 2005 when I got into my first NA meeting in Llandudno. Well, actually, I had been a few years earlier in London, but I certainly wasn't there for recovery. I was there trying to score. It always felt like if they wanted to do anything, they'd maybe try and get you off drugs, but there was no afterlife. There was no like life after drugs kind of thing. There was no kind of life skills or teaching about anything. It was like you're in testing and scripting, and there was never any talk about anything else. Over all the years, I can't ever remember talking to anybody about recovery.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was my experience as well. I don't think people didn't talk about abstinence. So whenever I went for help, it was always about control, about managing your intake and stuff like that. And you know, with anyone that's got a drug and alcohol problem, we know that control is not an option. You know, I tried to do that my whole life unsuccessfully. And yeah, that's kind of the theme and the story here from a lot of people that go to the services. For them, maybe they don't look at people and think they can live a full life drug-free. Do you know what I mean? It's not given. And I think that's possible for absolutely anyone. And that's what I've seen over the time. But
it's like the analogy that Wulf made of the sticking plaster.
Yeah.
Just patching people up and kind of getting them out of the door of a script or some not really addressing anything.
And thinking that was the success, that was the issue, that was success. If you were turning up, taking the script, well, I used to call them piss and test services, but if you were literally, you know, you turn up, you piss in the bottle, you test, and if you were clean and you were taking the script, everyone would conclude that was it. That was the success.
That's counted.
That was the success. That was success. And you were going back to, your fucking shitty bedsit. You were wandering around different corners just to try and make sure you didn't see anyone, because if you saw anyone, you knew immediately you were going to take some gear, or alternatively, you started coming into the piss and test services, and people had come in, and you'd have someone else's urine inside a bottle, so you could. I'm sure you've played all these games, Marcus, at various points in time, and it was just like no one was moving on in life. There was this kind of weird cat and mouse between the drug users and the drug services. It was just.
But this all came about from the drug policy, which was based on a social cost model. This system was developed to cut crime. This was Tony Blair's idea, to cut crime. And in fact, in 2008 was the first service users conference, which was run by Drink and Drug News, who I used to write regularly for. Used to write in each of their editions.
DDN, isn't it?
Sorry?
DDN on the cover.
Yeah, DDN. Because Simon Shepherd, who was leading FedUp, and I, for Wired, as it was then before it became Wired In. But at this service users conference, the head of the NTA stood up and he said, you've got to accept reality. The reality is the only reason that the government is interested in you is you are causing crime. That's what he said. And I've got the exact words that were in DDN on the web. I just couldn't believe that the guy could stand there and do it and say it like that. So there was 500 people at that conference. So it really was not about people getting better. It was bean counting, really. And that really made me angry. And later on, I got a phone call from Ireland. And I wasn't frightened in speaking out about, there wasn't against methadone per se, it definitely has its uses, but it was the fact that people were not given choices and they were just being parked on benches. And I got a phone call, I can't remember whether it was 2008 or whatever, from someone in Ireland that I knew, and he said, David, he said, I've got to give you some bad news. I've got to tell you, I've got a friend who works for the National Treatment Agency, and he wanted you to know that they've just deemed you as a public enemy. I was speaking out about methadone. I think the basic problem was I was also empowering people, and the treatment system, by that stage I realised it was there for itself and the services, people at the top. It wasn't there for the people that really needed the help.
And within 2-3 years of those episodes, as we say, there were thousands and thousands of people on the streets in Glasgow, Birmingham, Cardiff, all wearing purple, all shouting really loud and going, yeah?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was...
On recovery kind of march.
No, that was really fantastic to see. And then the feeling that I got from when we set up the Wired Into Recovery online community, it was just so exciting to see people writing away about their experiences, supporting each other. You would have someone come on and then you would see all the comments and someone would say, that reminds me of my story and whatever. And we would have people who would be typing away on their phone little things, and we'd have to try and edit, hit the wrong buttons and everything. So we couldn't just put things up because sometimes it was gobbledygook. But the spirit that was coming through there was just so powerful. You started to feel that the messages were getting out more and more in different places, that this system is not serving the people who really needed the help.
Right up until, when was it, 2014 was my last time I was engaged with anyone from drug and alcohol services. And even right back then, I still hadn't heard the word recovery. And it was only till I went to, I hadn't heard it from services. I'd heard it in fellowship. I went to a rehab that was pretty much staffed by people in recovery. And that was incredible for me, really. Throughout my life, I've had people, police, prison officers, family, lots, an army of drug and alcohol workers, everyone telling me how to stay clean, how to get clean, how to stay clean. But it was only when I met people who were doing it, and they showed me how to do it rather than telling me all the time, because I just couldn't do it. That was the big change for me, actually having people around me, peers, to look and like how they're doing it, and that kind of, I hear often that recovery works for osmosis. It kind of rubs off on each other. And the projects we run, I see it all the time. There's a lot of healing done in a minibus.
Yeah.
So how's it work at North Wales Recovery Communities?
So from my kind of experience, I stopped engaging with the services as well because I kept failing. I couldn't control my using and stuff. And
did you feel like a failure?
Absolutely. I felt worse and worse. The more you fail, the worse the worse you feel. I hated everything about myself. I had resigned myself to just dying of an alcoholic death. And then a friend of mine got into recovery through 12-step, through CA, and that was someone I knew, someone that, had been my lifelong. We were, Patsy and Eddie of AbFab, we were called. And she was clean and sober. And I don't think if I'd seen that change in someone that I knew, and she told me she was happy for the first time in her life, and I'll never forget that, her saying, "I'm happy, Al. I'm happy for the first time ever," because I just didn't know I didn't know it was possible. Recovery, I'd never heard of that either. So that was kind of my journey in, and I started going to North Wales Recovery Communities through 12-step, and I had no idea of any other form of recovery, just my bad experience. Do you remember, Wulf? Because he did a lot of work with me. But I'd got my own experience of the services, which hadn't been positive at all. And then I'd got, CA, which was my routine, and 12-step, and no experience of anything else. So I started facilitating a meeting there. And then we went into lockdown, and, the recovery world just took off. It just took off. We all went online. It was an incredible time to be in recovery because we were hearing stories from people all over the world, and people were on meetings all the time. But I did feel that isolation. Even though you're connected, there's nothing like human connection, is there? And I was looking on Facebook and seeing North Wales Recovery Communities doing all this stuff together. So I rang James and I was asked if I could volunteer there.
Where were you when you first heard of North Wales Recovery Communities then? Was this during lockdown or?
Yeah, well, I'd started facilitating a meeting there. So I was 6 months clean and sober, and we didn't have CA up in North Wales.
How did you do that? Was it rehab? Or you just?
No, I did. So my recovery was purely through 12-step.
Right.
So
in the community.
Yeah, in the community and connecting with people.
I'm in awe of people that can do that. I could never do it. Absolutely in awe of them.
Do you know what?
Yeah, I needed to be thrown in a bin every time. It's like a raggy doll.
I was pretty isolated already. I was in London. I did all the things, moving and stuff
You're
like
a
that.
girl, weren't you?
No, not quite. No, not at all. Do you know what? I think the first time I walked into a fellowship meeting. It was an AA meeting, actually, and I heard people sharing their stories. That was the first time. Obviously, my friend had told me this, and that's one person I know. So I'm like, I know it can happen because she's told me and she's happy. And then I went into this meeting. All these people, it was actually quite a different generation. They're all a lot older than me, and they all looked quite shiny and healthy, and then they were telling all of these stories, and they were laughing, and I could relate to their experiences. And I would say that is the first time I left there thinking, my goodness, maybe I can live, is actually what I thought. Maybe I can actually live. And that is the power of people sharing their stories, which was a magical time, actually. But that exposed me to all different kinds of addicts, because obviously, I've identified with people, so I know I'm no longer alone in this world, but then I think everyone's like me. But it's not that simple either, is it? It's been a massive learning curve for me being at North Wales Recovery Community, and I think what we sort of encourage there is that individuality, isn't it? It's about people finding their recovery path and model, because there are different ones, I think for 12-step, it's for the really fucked up, truly hopeless addict, probably like me and you. like me and you. But for some people, especially the younger, it can be their environment. There's trauma. There's so many different reasons. So there's different cures. I liked what you said, David. It's first of all, it's giving people that hope, isn't it? Because what I see is, recovery unlocks people's potential completely. We shouldn't be limited on what you just don't have to steal anymore. You can be on a script, or you can just get through your miserable life a little less painfully.
I think it's a big part of the idea of the podcast is that testimonial is until you hear somebody's story, you just think it's you. Like, I'm bad. What's wrong with me? I'm insane. I'm bad. I'm sad. Why am I so fucked up? But then you meet a lot of other people that are fucked up as well. But they're getting through it, and they're helping each other, and they're sharing those stories and supporting each other, and ageism aren't involved. Nobody's talking about scripts. Nobody's talking about taking one. I always thought it was bizarre when I went to the doctors or drug and alcohol, and it's like I wanted to take my chemicals, but they wanted to give me their chemicals to stop me taking their chemicals when their chemicals are worse. The methadone, that absolutely destroyed me, methadone. And even when I was on the streets and living in a car park in Bangor, and the doctor put me on antidepressants, and I went on, and I came to the point, I shouldn't be happy about this life.
You're living on the streets.
I'm living in a stairwell.
The social political animals in David and I take it further than the way you've described it, because it's not just about them wanting you to not take your drugs but to take their drugs, but they actually don't want you to give your money to that bloke over there. They want you to give your money to their mates. And so there's another cynical level behind it, which is if we can get everyone into a pharmaceutical and a treatment world, we can actually also prop up this massive economic world where people are making billions of pounds, and we can buy into that stuff.
Can I? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to quickly mention you talking about antidepressants. There's a beautiful piece of research done in Liverpool where they've talked with people about what antidepressants actually did. And I had a friend who was on antidepressants and had come off, and I asked her the same set of questions and everything, and she'd say, yes. And then there was a no, and the partner went, it was a yes, because he had to deal with it. And what antidepressants do is they make you not care. They don't necessarily lift your mood, you don't care. Now, the problem with that is I don't care about my partner, or I don't care about my life, because some of the antidepressants increase suicide.
Yeah.
And that's one of the clearest findings, because there's a lot of dubious research on antidepressants. So you took your antidepressant, if the antidepressant was going to work to you, you wouldn't care that you were living like shit on the street.
Yeah.
And these guys would be happy, as Ruth said, they're making more and more money.
Yeah, for sure. And I heard, it's probably off subject a little bit, but I heard depression is when you don't care enough, and anxiety is when you care too much.
Yeah. You probably had both, yeah.
Oh, all the time right now.
But going back to this thing about stories, I mean, to me, two of the major things that I think have helped people is one, human connection. It's I alone can do it, but I can't do it alone. And the second is the power of story. And then I think about...
It's powerful as a testimony.
Yeah, at all sorts of levels.
But it proves it's possible, doesn't it?
It proves it's
possible. I mean, on Amazon, I'll read the review before I buy something and just see what other people's experiences are, the non-fake ones. And, and I'll always go to the worst reviews first and work my way up. But it's kind of like that, you're listening to shares in fellowship, and it's like, especially if you're newcomers, oh my God, this is possible. People do have a life after addiction. That's one of our little strap lines, eternal life after addiction.
Yeah, and also it may just be a situation that someone further down the road in their recovery had come across. You think, that's what I've been having a problem with. But another thing about it is, when I was younger, I was a junior chess champion. all right, and very high level. How did I get better other than keep playing the game? I used to study the games of masters. That's what we all did. So therefore, it's a similar sort of situation. I should be learning from those who have been there.
You know, as Alex was saying, I think there's as many ways to recover as there are addicts.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone has their own combination. What worked for me last week might not work for me this week, and you know, just switch it around. And by meeting other people in recovery, you kind of, there may be many different ways to recover, but we're often faced with the same problems along that pathway. And you know, hearing how other people have got through it, and I think at the end of the day, human beings just want to help each other, whether that be in recovery or not. I mean, if you pull up in the road and you ask somebody for directions, they're quite happy to tell you. They just want to be helpful, most people. And you know, the kind of program that we're on, kind of, if you boiled it down into 2 steps, it'd be stay clean, help others. That's kind of.
And that's one of the amazing things about this field that really has captivated me initially and has kept me going, is people have just gone through so much adversity and then they're ready to help others. And that's very special.
But I think that's one of the keys to staying sober, isn't it? You know, it's helping other people. And I think that's why something like North Wales Recovery Community works, because people there don't want anything from each other. They just want other people to get well, and you need to make it as accessible, don't you, as possible. And it's taken away that, because we're so ashamed, aren't we, when we come into recovery?
Yeah, for sure.
We're just so ashamed. And when someone goes, yeah, I've been there too, it's just a leveler, isn't it?
I was lucky that I had the counsellor I had in Open Minds, who was in recovery from heroin, and we had very similar kind of history, and he lifted that guilt and shame off me very, very quickly. You know, he just had a way about it, and he just like, oh right, you know, it's the addiction. It wasn't me that did any of that. It was the addiction. I make any time I can think of a reason to go down to North Wales recovery communities, I go, and I absolutely wish that place was around when I was getting clean, and that when I was on the streets of Bangor busking and begging and all that horribleness. And you're right, you don't make a lot of money in Bangor busking. You do in Llandudno though. I was doing 70 quid an hour there. But yeah, I mean, would love a North Wales recovery community in Wrexham.
Yeah,
I'd love that to be built up.
This is one of the things that we're very interested in. David and I have a lot of conversations about it, and you know, that's maybe why you said we're very much connected at the moment. And I think one of the things that we're trying to work out is why you can have something like North Wales Recovery Community in other places, but you can't have North Wales Recovery Community. So in the same way that you've just been describing each individual recovery journey, even though we do it together, I think we're beginning to understand that each recovery community is completely unique. Yeah. There's common characteristics, but they are completely unique. They somehow reflect the people and the space to it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember years and years ago having this dream there would be something like this, but my something like this was there, and there were all these out there way beyond that sort of dream. But they're different.
They're all different.
Yeah.
As we try to delve more into each community, there's commonality, but there's difference as well. Exactly the same way as that there's commonality between yours and Alex's story, but there's absolute difference as well. And that's, you know, so something can and does, and maybe you are the equivalent, you know, maybe that's the point. Eternal Media is the equivalent of North Wales Recovery Community. Yeah.
And then we've got the gym-based one in Derry, in Northern Ireland. But they all share, they do share several things. Because of course they are people in recovery, and they are incredibly passionate about what they do.
The thing is, wherever there's misery, there's money. There's money to be made. And the thing about North Wales recovery communities, they're not in it for the money.
That's something we're lacking.
Occasionally it's a problem for us that we don't even get that bit vaguely right. Yes.
Yeah,
And that's what
we're never in danger of making a profit either.
But can I tell you something? I mean, the most incredible things happening at our place at the moment with just some of our community members, you know, that some of them are professional boxers and stuff like that. And they've come in and seen our gym and they're just like, how can people train? They've just gone around raising money and they've been in there painting it. They laid the flooring yesterday. I mean, it looks... I came in yesterday and it just looks like a different space, and that's just graft and just from people in our community. So I'd rather it grow that way than someone give us some money and tell us what we have to do. You know, it's grassroots.
In your place is residential, you know, we have plenty of projects on where people come to us weeks, months, you know, some people stay with us for years, but it's kind of project by project kind of thing, unless they're volunteering with us in the day.
Sure. That residential bit was really unusual though, because of all those conversations that I had with James right at the beginning and James had with one or two other people. It was this idea that it had to be a porous residential community. So what most people know of residential communities are rehabs and they're closed communities. And this one had to be porous. Yeah, it had to be porous. It had to have the community coming in and the residential community going out. Yes, because that's the only way you'd reciprocate with each other and build their lives. If you had the wall, then
institutionalised.
You're still also contributing to that moment of the sticking plaster for people inside the house, because you're still postponing the moment. They've still got to do the real stuff.
Yeah, yes. But you've got to leave.
You've got to step into the real world at some point in time with the drug dealers, with the family. You've still got to get out there. You can't live in the bubble.
No, it is a bubble. It's certainly rehab is a bubble.
Yeah, rehabs are bubbles, and they work because they give people breathing. Again, I said earlier, I don't want to knock them because they give people the breathing space. Yeah. If you're struggling so much, maybe it's the only way you can slow down enough to start. But
you've still got to make that.
You've still got to make.
You're going to be on your own sooner or later out there.
Yeah, I think it was my 5th rehab that I went to. Plenty of detoxes and all the rest of it, and I sat there. You know, and all I wanted from them was a day clean, show me how to do that. But still, I think the 3 words you hear out of somebody in rehab is yeah or no, yeah or no, yeah or no. So you're unteachable. You know, you can't, because addicts know it all. And when you sat in like a group environment, and you've been in plenty of groups before, oh God, this again, and yeah, no. At that point, you don't even know what you don't know. And I used it. I went in there thinking, right, I'm just using this as a safe space. I know what I'm doing. Get away with speaking as little as possible and not kind of opening up to anybody. And I was quite successful at that. But something changed in there. I did have that cognitive change. And I think it was that group environment of being around other addicts in recovery, the staff in recovery. And it was all that coming in. And it might have just been the time for me as well. I might have just had enough pain, because I think pain's a great instigator of change. And I had an incredibly painful existence. And I just think it just hit my pain barrier eventually. And, you know, and I keep that pain close. I don't forget about it, because it's one of my tools to stay clean. I'll go, you know, I don't want to go back there, you know. And it's building up that. And what I like about North Wales recovery communities, I don't know if I'm using the term correctly, but I feel it's recovery capital. In my case, heroin was absolutely everything. It was, you know, I was married to it. It was my only reason for being. When something means so much to you, it's your only reason to get out of bed. You have to start building quite a lot up in your life to make it not worth going back there, I think. And I think what you do at North Wales recovery communities, you expose people to different things, activities, different ways to recover. You're so rooted in the community as well, and you're in a beautiful location, you know, kind of the foothills of Snowdonia and the Menai, and even that's a therapeutic environment to be in. That's why we take people when we do filmmakers academies and stuff. we get a minibus and we head down the coast. You know, we go to beautiful places because that's part of the healing. You know, that can be like the spiritual awakening. I'm not religious, but you know, just from looking at your feet for 25 years on the way to your dealer and raising your head and actually looking around you and just seeing how beautiful things are. And no one's making money out of that. Recovery is free. It doesn't cost anything. That's possibly why people aren't maybe pushed into recovery. I don't know. Or supported into it and left on a script. I don't know.
I think people think it's a choice, don't they? And I think people think that if you're in addiction, you're choosing that life, and you know you're making that choice. I mean, no one would choose to live in such pain, would they? And it's horrific. It's horrific.
Don't ask Wulf about this.
We can save that for. I'm being very polite today. We can save that for a whole nother world.
a whole nother.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't feel like it at the time.
Maybe initially it's that solution is a choice, but I don't think the where you end up where it becomes definitely it's no longer.
It doesn't feel like a choice if you don't know how to do it. It's like I don't know how to do recovery. I've been on drugs and alcohol. I've been drugs for so long, or alcohol so long. I don't know what it is to be clean and sober. I have no concept of having a day clean, or how to do that.
Yeah, or how to manage all the other pain that's going on.
Yeah,
because that's the thing.
And the further I got away from my drug addiction, the more I realised my drug addiction had nothing to do with drugs. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It's just a manifestation of something far larger.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solution to me for all this internal conflict and all of that sort of pain, and it worked until it didn't. Then it's another whole world of pain, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still an addict. I don't think addiction goes away. There's always something.
You're channeling it now in a beneficial way.
There's always something. It could be like the bakery section of Lidl. There's always something. It could be too much gin. It could be technology. It could be, there's always something.
There is. I think I've got Wulf actually to thank for one of my new addictions.
Is that walking?
Yeah, yes.
Well, actually leggings, but
leggings. Yeah. I thought it'd be grown up today. I've got proper trousers on today. Well, I have.
So have I. It's almost like I'm matching. I didn't know what he was wearing today, guys. I didn't. But and the mountains. I mean, we without a shadow of a doubt, we are blessed with that. And what's beautiful as well, we talk about recovery communities, but one of our community members who has got well and really embraced mountains, Rob, and he now comes back and takes our guys out, and he's sharing that love, because that is, it's not the foundation of his recovery, but it's about finding new stuff that makes you feel good, isn't it? And he's sharing that with everyone.
And it's the best journey. For me, after 12, 15, I can't even remember when I first took you up on
2005, you tried to kill me.
2005, I first took you up on mountain life. So having been involved in those recovery mountain experiences for what now, as Marcus reminds me, I've been doing it for 18 years, to finally have a member of the recovery community that's going to have all of the qualifications and the experience to lead, instead of always being instead of just needing the odd friend to come and just make sure we're kind of safe on the hill and we know where we're going. It's so excited. I'm so excited.
And Leanne's leading a walk this Friday as well. It fills my heart with absolute joy, because when you see people's faces the first time that they're out in this environment, it is that looking up. Tamara took her to bed Geller from Liverpool. She was like, oh my God, look at this river. It's, things we kind of take for granted. It's,
It's interesting that leading trauma experts these days are talking about that the people who really understand what healing is about, the healing of trauma, disconnection, whatever, are Indigenous peoples. Okay, so it's ironic because since we've been destroying their cultures, the strong ones have kept going, but several of the key things are connection to culture, connection to country, and the power of story. You're connecting to country when you're out on Snowdon and
creativity and
I'm not sure what Western culture is anymore, neoliberalism or whatever, but you're creating your own culture and you have your stories.
As we were talking then, it just kind of, it dawned upon me, but in Wales, how far are you, 70 miles away? Going down?
65.
Okay, 65 miles away from here, maybe Birmingham. I don't know anybody in Birmingham in recovery. I don't know any organisation in Birmingham. I think what we have in Wales, I think we're all really well connected. In Wales, I think is very strong. We just seem to know. I know people doing Sara down in South Wales. I know so many people doing their own kind of recovery thing, or even agencies. I just feel we're so well connected, and
Definitely becoming more so.
I've lived in England, and it didn't feel there was no connection. I just don't feel they have that. I think North Wales and Wales as a whole is just really friendly.
It certainly feels it now.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I mean, I'm lucky where I live as well, and there is I live in Blaen and Festiniog, but there is a community there, which is lovely, and I think it is this key thing about communities, isn't it? That and maybe because Wales is still a bit smaller, there is still that. So I think it's easier to build that.
When you feel coming out of addiction, you just feel so isolated. Especially my, addiction for me was incredibly lonely at the end. That's why I wanted it, but it was very lonely. But to come into something, and I can remember walking to the bunker for the first time. I actually went to the rehab, which was next door back then. I needed a bit of music kind of recording, and I knew the bunker was there. And I came through the blast door of the bunker, and it felt like home, weirdly. I hadn't had a home for a long time, and the bunker felt like home. And it's like, I feel like I belong here. That sense of belonging can't be underestimated in early recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we go forward, I think we all, and it might be the same as for tribes, just feel like you need to belong to something.
Yeah,
Reason to get out of bed, reason for being, and a sense of belonging. And I think that's what people get here, and I think that's what people get in North Wales recovery communities as well. That sense of belonging. Yeah, I'm among friends, I'm in the right place, I feel safe, I feel supported. Whether they're thinking that or not, I think that's how they feel.
And if you think back to where we were hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were clans. You didn't have just mum and dad. You had 20 different parents, because we wouldn't have survived as human beings without being in a clan. And I think that's what we've been losing. We're becoming more and more isolated. And that's as you found the other direction, which is to connect in community.
We had one guy that hadn't been out of his house for 20 years come to us on a project a few years ago now. And he hadn't stepped outside of his house for 20 years, and we managed to convince him to come out with us and do stuff. And that was his turning point. It was very powerful to kind of experience that. And we had him for 10 weeks, I think, something like that. And he didn't go back in after that. He continued with his life after that, and still in touch and stuff. But it's just that.
I remember walking with someone once in recovery, and they'd not been that long sober. And we're walking along, and they were suddenly just stood staring at this tree. I went back and I said, "Are you all right?" And they just went, "Do you know, I've never realised that leaves are green, and there are lots of different greens." And they were transfixed in something so obvious as we can look out the window now. And they'd gone however many years of being addicted, and had completely disassociated from even something as simple as a leaf on a tree.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot from people who have...
And are they in recovery? Was it early recovery?
Yeah, early recovery. This is transfixed.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's not something you think about on the way to school, really.
No, exactly. So
you worry about what colour your brown is.
but important, But it's important to say, isn't it, that if connection is a part of recovery, as you've just described it, and right at the end, you were doing it as much as possible, disconnection becomes your survival mechanism. Yes, you disconnect from anything other than, like you say, your gear, basically, or your bottle. You try and disconnect from everything else.
Yeah, it just becomes the only thing left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're only searching for oblivion, aren't you? That's it in the end.
Yeah. I got my high was overdose in the end. That was like, if I wasn't falling backwards and having a fit, I thought I'd been ripped off. And where do you go from there?
I think I think also there's something else there, and I love this expression from that trauma expert Bruce Perry. He talks about going from pain to power, that you learn a lot on that recovery journey, and through that you gain a new power.
Essentially, Jim Orford did that as well in his book, Power and Powerlessness.
Yeah, and I love that concept, and you can see just by what you guys are doing that's one form of power. And there's an irony here, really, because we've got a society which is increasingly disconnecting. And the trauma experts point out, society is fraying. And yet within your communities, you're going the other way. And that's something that your messaging needs eventually to start getting, well, you're already doing it, out to the wider society. I think that's one of the reasons is that we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, of course, it's what we're...
I have personally experienced so much bad practice. I'm not a victim towards me. Such terrible treatment ideas, the way I was counselled. I've had, don't get me wrong, I've had some amazing people in there as well. But on the whole, I've had a terrible time. I've had to go through that. So I know what doesn't work. I nearly said I'm fortunate enough. Maybe that's not the right word, but I don't do any of that. And I reckon Alex and James and Kev and the others down at North Wales Recovery Communities, they have their own experiences of things that could never work. So they're putting things together that have worked for them, and they're building on their own experience, a collective experience of stuff that does work. And I think that's a success that we're having, because we've been a part of failure for so long. We can find success in there.
And that's a power as well.
And as David says that, then that is what David and I have been trying to do together, which is just show to people, look, listen to these folk. This is what, to use your expression, this is what works.
So at what point is recovery? Where does recovery start? Where do you reckon recovery starts? Does it start in rehab? Does it start in detox? Does it start the minute you're not taking a chemical or commit a crime? What does it? Do you have to be out?
For me, it doesn't start in a physiological space. It starts in my use of the word sober. So I struggle with the word sober being used exclusively as a relationship to a substance or not, rather than sobriety is when you enter a different mode of thinking. For me, there's unsober thinking and there's sober thinking.
Cognitive change kind of thing.
Yeah, and you might actually, some people might be fortunate enough to get some sober thinking before they've actually got sober behaviour, and other people don't actually get sober thinking until they've actually, inverted commas, gone quite a long way down some sober behaviour. And actually that's the far more interesting bit, is working out when people really started to make that cognitive change in not really the relationship with substances. As you said, it wasn't really about substances. It's they make the cognitive change about what they want for themselves and their life and their honesty, and that comes in. And all the time I've worked with people, that's the bit that I'm interested in, is even if you're struggling to make the behavioural change, but you've actually made the shift mentally, well, you're probably already starting. And I think for too often we've got into this problem of defining recovery exclusively as a position that's to do with your relationship with the substance rather than your relationship with yourself and your own head. Yes?
As one question to you, David, sorry. As we have a neuroscientist in the room, I'm not going to waste this opportunity. What is happening in the brain when a cognitive change on this level, which is just massive. So we've had decades of pain, misery, addiction, all that, and the cognitive change occurs. Is that a chemical thing? Is that a new pathway? Or
I think, as I said earlier, we can't nail that down because of the gap. No, we can't. No, what I want to do is follow on what you said, a piece of research we did, and it was nothing to do with biochemistry, other than the fact all our chemicals are going anyway. We, and Sara was part of this, she was involved in the interview, but Lucy James did all the analysis, did a qualitative piece of research on the RAPT treatment program. Yeah, so Sara worked with Wired In with me years ago. And we did, I say we, I mean, I didn't go into in the prisons, worked with a group of women whose average use of crack cocaine and heroin was 15 years, and a group of men, the average was about 20 years. And we looked at the factors, so they went on the RAPT treatment program. So there was pre-treatment, 2 weeks, and then they started AA and groups and everything. And the changes in the women were already occurring in these initial phases. And we analysed what led to the changes in thought processes and their behaviour, because obviously we couldn't measure drug intake, whether they're getting any in there or not. And so this was the process of change within the prison, the programme. One was belonging, was a major factor. The second one was socialisation, the process of learning to interact with other people, because you can't belong unless you can interact. They all said they were isolated, they felt they were evil and weak, they beat themselves up all the time, they had no hope or anything. Now, when you looked at that, and then there was support, there was understanding, and there was one other factor. And they all led to an increase in motivation to change and an elevation in self-esteem. But when you looked at that socialization process, the first thing that triggered it was to learn a bit of trust.
Right, yeah, huge.
How can you start to belong if I don't trust you? Mm-hmm. Once that process started to occur, they started to belong. And once they were belonging, they started to open up for the first time. Now, I can't tell you what chemicals are involved in that. There would be 20, 30. But it was really interesting, those little processes, but that trust.
So another word for belonging, or they go hand in hand, is acceptance.
Yeah, there's a level, yes.
Acceptance is huge. I think
yes.
I've met a lot of people, do you know what, and I might even be one of them, who started drugs, or at least continued the trajectory into harder drugs, the clubbing days, and for acceptance.
Yeah, to belong, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think now with more and more kids getting disconnected, that's even more important. And yeah, acceptance, yeah.
And listening to you emphasise the word trust, and we were talking earlier about why does the treatment system struggle to work for so many people, and partly because those are not trusting relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Down so much.
They are.
It's clinical.
They are best. They're just really an exchange. You put it nicely. If I come in and say the right things and piss in the bottle correctly, can we have this exchange in which you'll then give me this drug and I can go away? Yes, but there's no trust.
I came in with a tea bag, right? I'd go into the toilet, they'd give me the cup, I'd put hot water in it, dip a tea bag into the right consistency, and put whatever drug in there they think I should be taking. Because they didn't test if it was urine, they just tested what was in a warm, yellowy liquid.
But the other thing that's what the system has is it has a hierarchical set of relationships. And
Yeah, of course, yes.
That doesn't work.
You don't get trust if there's not
Yeah.
an equal equal humans.
I'm a
yes.
practitioner, and you're the poor sod who's come to see me. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know best.
I'm also going to tell you you're going to do it at 9:10 in the morning, and I'm not going to see you at 7:00 at night.
Yes.
So one of the other things that I've always felt was really important in North Wales recovery community is the fact that the front door is open from 7 in the morning till 11 at night. And I think that's just really important. You know.
Yeah, you can only have a crisis between 9 to 5 normally.
Yeah. And on a Monday to a Friday.
I'm not putting services down. I
of course not.
I reckon they saved my lives on a number of occasions.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I said that to David. I did say it to David earlier. We must always remember that our first job is to keep people alive, because if you can only recover if you're alive.
Yeah,
So
there is
let's not get it.
Yeah, and I have met some amazing people in services as well. And Julie,
that's
do
really
you know what I'm going to say her name? Julie McDonald was massive for me. She was fantastic. Yeah, she was.
And that was one of the things in those early 2 years we were doing the evaluation, the number of practitioners we met who were disillusioned with the system was huge. And there's a lot of good people in the services.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some good friends in the services now. We've been doing a lot more joint stuff, especially with Tony and things, which the last couple of years we have to all work together. It's, this is, I think separating us all is part of the problem. It's, if we're going to be a recovery community, that involves the services, doesn't it? It involves everyone.
Yeah, no, of course.
And it helps when you've got someone like Tony who's been there in charge of that.
Tony will be here
It
for lunch.
also helps, of course, in North Wales Recovery Community, where our chair of trustees is also part of the drug service. So,
Exactly.
the great Sara. So Sarah's
Sarah Flynn.
Yeah.
Oh, she hated me. I met Sarah in a hospital bed first time.
David's going to meet Sara tomorrow for the first time. So.
Yeah.
She's
Every time I turned up in Bangor, she's told me since, when I was back in the area, they all rolled their eyes in the office. Yeah, I think we're okay now.
She is fabulous.
Yeah, I wasn't easy to deal with. That was a nightmare.
I tell you, I mean, just sitting on the other side of the world, watching what's going on here, it is just so exciting. It's really,
It's isn't it kind of ice methamphetamine over in Australia? That's the real problem. Is that a big thing?
Yeah, it's big. I don't know what the biggest. Well, no, the biggest thing is by far alcohol.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it is everywhere then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've sort of pulled.
Well, sound okay, maybe not.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I don't get involved very much in Australia with what's going on. I banged my head against a brick wall for so darn long. The system is just.
And when you stepped out, didn't you? You spent that time doing work with Carolup and the Indigenous community.
Yeah, so I did a lot. Yeah.
Almost stepped out of drug and alcohol world, and you were doing a little bit of recovery stories, but it became Carolup, became the big thing.
Yeah, because I was really shocked at the level of racism in Australia when I got there, and then I read a book by a lady called Judy Atkinson, which taught me about intergenerational trauma. So from the colonisation process, we were raping, pillaging, killing culture, etc. Trauma then just got passed down the generations. But the lady also was talking about healing practices. And I set up an educational initiative and got a lot of people around the world interested as advisors. Couldn't raise any money at all there with it. So I then decided I needed to tell stories, and I came across this incredible story of these Aboriginal child artists. Because in Australia from 1905 they started to take Aboriginal children away from their parents so that we could make them white. And they housed them in native settlements living in total squalor. But there was this teacher that went to one of them, and clearly the kids were traumatized because I've got all sorts of documents, and I knew the daughter of the teacher himself, and he connected with these kids and inspired them, and they became incredible artists, young children. That art has circulated the world, And I work with an anthropologist who's been working with Aboriginal people for 50 years now, and on that story for that length of time. And he said there's been no child art movement like that anywhere in the world. And now you see the impact of it in prisons, because so many of them ended up, because once they left that school, they had to go into, the government closed the school down because it was getting too much publicity. And then the kids went into the racist white society, and a lot of them ended up in prison. But then they started teaching each other the art in prison, so it's come through there. And it's a beautiful thing to see that, again, it's pain to power. Those kids have left a legacy of art. So I spent a good while researching that, and then we set up a website, and I wrote a book about it, an ebook, published as an ebook, because I've got so many documents and pictures and letters and that sort of thing. I was banging my head against a brick wall trying to get things sorted in the drug and alcohol field, and
No, I'm squeaking.
I just moved like that. I thought I was squeaking.
Take another chair.
Yeah, so that's why my stuff has really been focused here.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm squeaky as well, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, so that's that's.
And this is so on Friday. What's happening?
Well, I'm going to do something I've never done in my life before. So at 6:30, the doors open at Border Banger. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
How'd you say, Alex?
Buddha.
Buddha.
What, Alex? What's Buddha?
Good food, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good food, a banger. Yeah. Oh, it's
There's a bit more to it, isn't there?
yeah. So it's a restaurant that North Wales Recovery Communities opened. Was it 3 years ago now?
Post-COVID.
Post-COVID. Yeah. So
And it gives opportunities.
It gives opportunities for employment and training, and apart from that,
It's a bit of a mixture between people in recovery and people just not normal people.
yeah. I mean,
Earthlings.
there's lots of different barriers to employment, not just addiction. People without skill, life skills or experience and that kind of thing. But it's also part of being part of the community, being visible. The regeneration of the high street, food sharing. There's lots of
it's food sharing, and it's connected to food bank work and stuff. But the beauty about it is that there's a whole set of folk in the community who just come in and just see it as Alex has described it. Good food and friendly people. And then nothing else. They do nothing else. They just come in because it's good food and friendly stuff, and then they go away again, don't they?
Yeah, and the food is good. Yeah.
No.
The underlying story or anything.
And there's a bit of a stage in there.
There is a stage there.
And David, you're going to be on it.
Yeah, so at 7:00, I'm going to be talking my journey from brain chemicals to human connection. Mm-hmm. We then pause for dinner. So on the 1 hour, I've absolutely, wherever I am, I'm going to stop.
So we have dinner.
We can't. I've seen the menu.
Yeah.
That's really good. And an hour later, I start up again for another hour. Healing and community, from pain to power. I think
you can have quite a big audience, aren't you?
I have no idea.
It sounds like it.
Good. But we must go in actually earlier to make sure I get a feel for it.
Yeah, we'll do all that.
The system is working.
We just need to make sure the Rotherham recovery folk arrive in time. So I'll programme them, because they're coming across, a couple of people, hopefully from Rotherham. And we're going to see the lovely Wendy first in the day, and go and have lunch with Wendy. And then she was Chester University, but she lives not far from you, actually.
Yeah.
She lives up the valley between Bettus and Blaina on the railway line, in the old railway station house. So we're going to go and see the Wendy, and so we'll get it sorted. So we got a very different sort of recovery day going on Friday.
But as I say, this is novel to me. I don't normally go to good food eating places
and
give a talk.
Yeah.
And covering a fair amount of ground. James, said, that you've got that amount of time.
Yeah.
Because there's a fair number of things I'd like to make reference to. Because I think one of the important things is to talk about things that help you realise what bloody good work you're doing. And also to put over that message that we've really got to get those messages out about what you're doing. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's really kind of you to say, because we're just working, supporting people. And you don't realise until, that you are doing fantastic, amazing work, really, and stuff that no one else is doing. Until somebody from looking from the outside in goes, no one else is doing that.
And that became our reconnection after the years of David and I having not really communicated with each other. We just started talking initially remotely and just catching up with.
Yeah, and you started to tell me these little things that are going on.
I just started to, and he just said to me, well, what happened since 2008, 9? And I talked about doing the recovery bit and, all those years of killing people up mountains. And we never killed anyone up a mountain.
Oh, it was close.
But we caught up with all these things, and I just started to say, and when I said to David that Tony's going to be coming in the room. Well, Tony and I did, massive kind of fundraising charity walks, and I just kind of explained to you, didn't I, the kind of nature of the community and the groups. I mean, there is the North Wales Recovery Group, but there was the preceding Agro story. There's the great work that you do, but there are one or two other lovely little pockets of recovery stuff. I mean, I love what Scott does with youth sheds, which is not what the rest of us do, but that's where he's put all that recovery energy into.
Scott in the Bay, Scott Jenkins,
And I love
good
what
lad.
he does. And I love your counterparts who do something different. Steve at Tape and stuff like that. And we've got lots of different groups of people.
We've got Yellow and Blue here as well. They're quite an amazing organisation.
And I talked to you, didn't I, about the fact that actually I could identify 15 or 20 of us who have been hanging around crossing each other's paths for a while. But actually, we don't have any problem now when we want to put an event on, and we had that one last year when Tommy came up in Bangor University. And I kind of explained to David, we just don't have an issue of getting a room, and we can get 50, 60, 70 people in recovery in a room. And we've just started taking it for granted that we've got that community out there in North Wales now, because we've just built and stayed where we are. And I think that's that North Wales bit. If you're in the Birminghams or the Coventries or stuff, people just disperse and move, and we've just stayed. And that was the conversation that led us to start to then go from just catching up with each other to then wanting to do a whole piece of work about it
and
together.
The thing is you're talking to someone who was bloody sex starved, in the sense of I was starved of having a lack of recovery around me. And so I was just like, bloody hell, what's going on?
I'll tell you who else is doing great work as well. And I don't know anyone in Birmingham, but I do know people in Stafford.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We've got
Chase.
yeah.
I think you mentioned
So we've been doing bits with it. JP and Car's been coming over, and whenever we work with anybody from England, we call it missionary work. So.
Yeah. Fully understandable.
But JP, I see so much myself in JP. He's got a passion for film and creativity. He's more, he does a lot of music as well, which I play music, but I don't record it. And but he tells me where he's at. I go, yeah, I was there. No equipment. I haven't got this. I haven't got that. I haven't got, And he's just, it's nothing stopping him. They're just cracking on. And Cara's incredibly. A real driving force. She's very creative as well. And those two together, and then the people that they're supporting, they're all singing or dancing, aren't they?
Yeah.
And those pockets are there. We've known those pockets for ages, and there are those occasional bridges, if you want to call them missionary work. And we talked earlier about the David Best episode, and one of the people in that room in the Recovery Academy with David Best was, of course, your very good friend David McCartney, and he does his work in Edinburgh, and I've known David since those days as well. So there have been those pockets, but I don't think they're not quite the same. I mean, what got me about it was realising how far the North Wales community had come was when we did the peer-to-peer walk. And there we are, 3 or 4 different groups of folk all getting together on a cold, damp Friday before Christmas, when everyone's got all sorts of pressures to do something else. And there are still 70 of us that have just...
All in Santa hats or costumes.
Oh yeah, I love those photos.
And it's just
I
like,
loved them.
there is a North Wales recovery community in the sense of, the one in Bangor, but there is also a North Wales recovery community, not as in the organisation, but the relationships that we now carry with each other and have known each other for many, many years, and just keep those bonds and keep bringing people into them and keep sharing. And I just think that's, it gives me a real buzz, yes.
Same here. And I was also thinking, because I was very much ingrained in this asset-based community development idea, find your assets and connect those assets. And suddenly I could see these little pockets that Wulf was telling you about. And I'm thinking, gosh, if we could start to get those messages out to the wider community about the great things that are happening.
I see this working all the time on an individual level. I see that the opposite of depression isn't happy, it's connection. And that's going back to Wales, we're just so well connected. We help people connect as well. The socially excluded, the socially isolated, behind their own front door where they've been for so long. And to kind of get them out and connect people, and then recovery is possible.
And I think that's another example of what I meant by that pain to power. And you've taken it beyond. I mean, within North Wales recovery communities, you're helping people recover within your community there, but also the messages are going out much wider now with the sort of work that you're doing.
It's not enough to be clean and sober.
Yeah.
And that's what I always thought the Holy Grail was, just don't use. There's so much more to life than just not using. It's like that life after addiction. There is one.
And in many ways, we've got quite a lot to help show and teach people who are just, for want of a better expression, mundanely going to work to 9 to 5. And there's actually got to be more than that as well.
So it's disconnected people. They don't necessarily need to be addicts.
No.
Not at the moment, they don't. No, they just...
And that's increasing in society today.
Yeah,
so that's sort of going back to that idea. And before, the irony of it is society's decaying, and you guys are showing the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, bizarrely, I'm not obviously happy for the pain I've caused my family and stuff, but I am actually glad that I'm an addict, because being in recovery has really opened my eyes up to actually living and what that is really like. Otherwise, I think I would have plodded on in some mundane life, being a little bit subdued, a little bit, the way I experience things now is really different in recovery, better than before. So it's
better than well.
Better than
that's the old, yes.
Yeah.
I think the first person to write me off in addiction was me. Yeah.
Oh,
at 21, I'd written myself off. This is all that's down for me. I'm a heroin addict. I'm a crack addict. That's all that's down for me. Maybe that gave me the green light to continue in how I was rather than trying to change. But for whatever reason, I wrote myself off first. No one else did. And when you get into recovery, every time I put a new project on, every time I'm working with people, and you see that little kind of glint of creativity, that little spark coming from like long dead eyes kind of thing. Whatever that little success of that little poignant moment of the day is, makes my addiction feel, my 25 years in addiction feel a little less wasted and useful.
Absolutely.
I need to feel useful. I think we all need to feel useful. But there are so many transferable skills from when you're in addiction, bringing that into a clean life. We do a lot of work in jail. We're going back into jail. We just created a podcast, a series of podcasts for them, working with the guys on the recovery wing and the recovery factory. And we're going back in there to do more. So we're working with people, and Alex came on it, and hope you'll come again.
Absolutely.
They're so hungry for recovery. So we get mobbed. Once they realise we're in recovery, we get mobbed. They've got 1,000 questions, and it's quite hard to get a day started sometimes because they've got so many questions. Let's save this for recording. But they've written themselves off as well. And they go, yeah, but I'm an addict, I'm never going to get a job, nothing's down for me. And then they're confronted with like, you know, we're not putting ourselves on pedestals, or we're special, we're definitely not. But, you know, then they meet addicts like myself and other addicts that we take in, and Alex. We're happy, we're clean, we're sober, we're doing something we're passionate about, we're helping others, we've got a job. And if anything, I've got quite a long criminal record, and it's part of my CV. You know, it's
you can use it to help.
Our experiences are really, really useful for other people kind of going through what we've been through.
Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of mountain walks now I've done with people in recovery. And only twice.
Do they all come back? Oh, what? Look.
Yeah. No, only twice have I been in walks 3 times, and the third time only reflects, well, maybe 4 times, but those 2 reflect 2 or 3 people, but only 2 walks in which we haven't actually taken the group to the top of the mountain. You know, and all of those people have written themselves off. I can't walk up a mountain, that's not possible. That's way beyond anything I can do. And only twice.
So by being confronted at the beginning of the day, and in your case, it is a mountain. In our case, it's a camera like that that's incredibly complicated.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, I can't use that.
Yeah.
And then a few sessions with us, and they're putting it together like a sniper rifle. And from that comes confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I can do this. And, you know, and it's all right.
What I like about all of those experiences, and whether it then becomes something else, and we were talking earlier about the gym, and it could be the boxing, it can be, we're going to go to Moyle Keatma, and it can be the horticulture. What I like about it is the idea that you have to give this diversity of choice, which doesn't occur in the piss and test of the treatment room. But you give the people the diversity of the choice, and almost everyone actually enjoys or gets something out of dabbling, and then 1 in 15 or 20 of those people will go, oh, I want some more of that specific thing. So you've been left as one of the people that wants more and more of the mountains.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and it's feeding you. But there are also other people who we know have done 2 or 3 mountain walks. They're never going to do another one again. But it doesn't matter. They're finding something else. And you'll have 1 or 2 people who want to just...
Sea level for me.
Yeah, and you'll have 1 or 2 people who just want to do this stuff forever now. And
If it's on a beach, I'm happy. Anyway.
And I kind of like that, really. I like the fact that you're giving people, and that's all that happens to the rest of us if you're fortunate enough to have an environment where those opportunities happen to you. You have a mate that says, oh, why don't you come and try the basketball club? And you might go twice and go, no, not for me. But you might be the one which you know, and people lost all that, haven't they? Just that.
I feel it's a duty to make recovery visible and attractive.
Yeah.
And because I do that, I can't really tell is there more recovery around nowadays? Are more people recovering? Or is it just because I see more people in recovery that I feel there are more people in recovery? Or do you think things have changed, the tide has? Because most people traditionally don't make it.
I think you answered this question yourself. So outside of kind of communities that you were talking about, you know, Indigenous communities and stuff, you answered the question yourself. If you'd have stepped back 20 years ago, maybe the only place you'd have seen the recovery was behind the AA closed doors in a way. So I think you probably answered the question yourself. You hadn't seen it in the first place you saw it was there.
Yeah.
And what has definitely happened since 2008, 2009 has been that
I think Tony might be here.
Okay, brilliant.
So a waving hand.
Yeah, man.
has been that explosion,
Yeah.
yes, of community recovery, public-facing recovery. It's still quite discreet, but it's much more public than an AA, which by definition, of course, is anonymous. It's not public.
No.
You know.
I think you're at the beginning of something very special. I honestly believe.
Talking of something very special.
Here he is.
Hello, Tony. So, well, we're kind of wrapping up.
Hi, Tony.
Tony, David. Yeah, Tony. It's all his fault, really. He got me.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all your fault. We're going to blame you, Tony, yeah?
Yeah, very unusual case it was at the time.
You're the idiot suggested taking a bunch of folk up mountains as well, I seem to remember as well.
Were you little brother or big brother?
Little brother, wasn't it? The code name.
Yeah, little brother.
Little brother.
And I was in relapse at the time when you'd done your paper on the mountains.
Yeah.
So you give me a phantom name.
I had to give you we had to give you an anonymous name in the story in the paper. Yeah. And you weren't there.
What was it? I didn't know that. What was your code name?
We gave people a set of false names, didn't we? You and Pika, Patrick, and Matt, and all the rest of them. We gave everyone false names in the story. Yeah. I never forget that. The bit of your story that just always amazes me is that you know, doing that, you should probably say it, but you're in that meeting with Peter and you're supposed to be doing your return to work or whatever it is, and he says to you, what's causing you a load of hassle?
Yeah, so I had a back to work advisor. His name Peter Kirkpatrick.
Yeah.
And a week before, I'd overheard the story. I was on a computer in an office, and a conversation went on behind me of someone that had just got back from Africa, and this extreme poverty in Africa, and my heart, I felt a shift. I thought, I've got to do something. So I spoke, we'd already been doing a couple of walks, and said, how about we do the 14 Peaks, and we'll do it as a fundraising event.
Just like that.
We'll do it as a fundraising event.
It's always been your way. Everything's possible. Yes.
And send a load of books to this school in KwaZulu-Natal in Africa, because apparently there was only 9 books on the shelf. This was the story I was hearing behind me. So we got an appetite between the people, but we knew we can't attempt something like that without any guidance. And so Peter Kirkpatrick this day, me back to work advisor, because I was doing voluntary work at the time, he had just got clean, and he said, what's the matter? You don't seem yourself today. So I poured my heart out to him about this African story, but we were stuck. I said, we've been quoted a couple of £1,000 from one mountain leader, and well, he just smiled at me and he said, it's going to be okay. I went, but how's it going to be okay? We're a community group, just a bunch of addicts coming up with good ideas to do something good. And he said, well, you don't know my past, do you? I went, no. He said, I'm a former RAF mountain leader, rescuer. He said, I'll do it for you, free of charge. And then Peter had spoke to Wulf, and then this event took place. We sent 2 containers to Africa.
Wow.
Books.
No, one was full of books, and one was full of computers. Duncan.
Yeah.
He scrounged all the computers off from all the officers, probation and stuff that wasn't being used, and so. But they got ripped off because there's a lot of corruption. Once the ship landed in Port Shepstone, the school teacher had drove hundreds of miles. The school headmaster drove hundreds of miles to pick these containers up with a lorry. And the corrupt customs said, oh, it's a couple of thousand, whatever the currency is there, it's a couple of thousand to have these released. And he wiped out the school funds, releasing the containers. What was? Oh, I'm going to get emotional. I'll take it to my grave. They sent us a disc. A film was made when the lorries come into the village, and they were dancing and chanting in the Zulu native tongue, and they gave us nicknames. My nickname was Stimuli, and I asked naively, why did he call me Stimuli? He said, because the containers stimulated the village.
Oh.
And brought life into a part of the world where there was a lot of AIDS at the time, a lot of different diseases, and now they could. The difficulty was they didn't have enough room for all the books and the computers. But I'll never forget the little girl's face as she was on the computer, and she turned to the camera and she just said, "Thank you, Stimuli, for changing our lives." And I just like, and don't happen. Don't know what happened to the desk.
That's another example of that pain to power that I was talking about. That's a wonderful story.
It was great. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and you were right. You were in relapse when you weren't around to be a co-author at the time. You'd gone on holiday, as it were, like, you know.
Suppose you could call it that. Yeah. And I never made the 14 peaks. I collapsed on the first section.
But
I bought a pair of shoes from Aldi, and it was I must have been the first person to try and walk crib gock in a pair of slippers, because that's what it felt like.
In your Aldidas.
They look good, but they had no soul.
I just want to say how brilliant this conversation's been, and it says everything about what we've been doing and folk get out of it, and just that I'm really looking forward to a really exciting week of events with David here and really showing him what's going on in the North Wales recovery community. So
Where else are you going?
So tomorrow we will go to Growing for Change in the morning. So
That's Sarah's, isn't it?
yeah, that's Sarah's bit. So that's an offshoot of the North Wales Recovery Community Project. That's now its own social enterprise. That's just around the corner from my house. Then we got the pleasure in the afternoon of meeting one of Alex's, my really good friends. So we're going to have a meeting with Sophie. Sophie's going to come round. Sophie's on a completely different recovery journey to most other people I know. So she's joined a group of people and has now just started as a full-time researcher. So she's in a group of people with lived experience that do full-time research, which is just brilliant. So we'll catch up with that side of a story, which is just a different way of giving back and connecting. And then on Thursday, we'll be in the main house, Penryn House, and you'll be with two different groups on that day. And then we're going to have a short break Thursday evening, and David and I are going to go to the Banff International Film Festival, keeping the film going, which is in which is in Llandudno that night. And then on Friday we're going to meet the fantastic, brilliant Wendy Dossett, and spend time with Wendy and go for a little bit of a walk with her and stuff. And then we'll be in Boyd Dar, Bangor in the evening when David's going to give his couple of talks, and we're going to get some of the fantastic food that Jason and the team cook. And on Saturday we're going to go and see if we can find some of David's ancestors in this particular church on Anglesey. We're going to go and look for on his mom.
He'd actually planned to take me to Anglesey, and I said, actually, I've got an ancestor.
So we'll do that, and then we'll have probably a little bit of discreet time Saturday. If the sun shines enough, I'll try and get maybe the pizza oven out and we'll do some pizzas. We'll see what we'll do on Saturday. And then on Sunday, the idea is to go on a walk with Sober Snowdonia, and we'll go up Molaleo. And Sunday night,
I'm used to beaches.
Sunday night, David will be exposed to the other form of connecting I do when all of my family come to my house Sunday evening for Sunday dinner. So we'll do that. And then on Monday, we're going to do a bit of a focus group with the people in Penryn and get them to do the opposite of what's going on here. We're going to ask them what works for them in recovery.
What time do you on Monday?
I think that's 10 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, 10 till 12, and then I think you're there in the afternoon.
Yeah, we're there 2 till 4.
Yep. So we're in the morning, we just want to do the opposite way. David and I want to find out from them what works for them at the moment in recovery, and then I'm going to abandon David and disappear down to South Wales and go and visit the communities in South Wales.
That's a dream for me, going around to lots of different countries and finding out what actually works in the prison system, and places like Portugal, and actually creating a documentary from different countries, finding the best practice and then kind of putting it in front of MPs and why aren't we doing this? Yeah.
I love it.
We've just employed someone yesterday.
Yeah.
Because she'd done a dissertation on Portugal and drug laws in Portugal, and she was amazing in interviewing. We thought she's perfect.
Brilliant. Final thoughts, David? Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap it up and go for a bit of scram?
I'm just so thrilled to be here.
It's lovely to have you here, honestly.
And it's a great discussion. I'm excited. It's just so weird that I'm sitting over there, tapping away or editing.
In Australia.
In Australia. And now I'm suddenly here. And, thinking back to those wired-in days all those years ago, And I said earlier, dreaming of something like this, except for you've gone way beyond that dream, and actually to see it. I just think it's so important now just to keep promoting what's going on out, what you're doing and getting it outside. The more people learn, I'm very excited.
Yeah, we've got a media company that's kind of, promoting is
Yeah, well, that's
what we're doing as well,
we need to find some money filming for us. This is what we need to do.
The bad news, I didn't win the lottery.
Have you not?
Last spoke to you.
Right.
But yeah, we need money to get, so you can do more. This is crazy. You're having to spend 90% of your time writing funding applications.
Oh, yeah, it's not what I got into.
No, that's not your talent. Sorry, I'm not disparaging.
I'm not bad
at it. We know what your real talent is, and we need to find ways to get you more money.
Yeah.
And NWRC as well, so they can. So yeah, I'm just so excited. It's great.
Honestly, it's been a pleasure to turn the tables on you and grill you through it. And you've both interviewed me on more than one occasion, and it just feels so great to actually ask the questions that I didn't get an opportunity to ask. I do feel that I know you so much better now. And Tony, I know you've come in late to it, but anything you want to say?
No, just happy to be here.
How's recovery in North Wales?
It's there. It's thriving. I think the system holds the movement back a bit, especially the changes within the system.
Yeah.
Especially prisons. What's going on in prisons at the moment? It's diabolical.
Right. There's a whole nother podcast, this, isn't it? When you're coming back.
Yeah. I know they've got to do risk assessments. They've got to release people who are in. There's an earlier release scheme at the moment, 35 days earlier release scheme. So they're doing risk assessments. So there's no room in prisons. So they're letting someone who's just in for habitual shoplifting's out 35 days early, and replacing that with maybe someone who's a danger to the public, so rapist or exchange of bed within a day. So he's going into a cell saying you're out because you're in that 35-day window. But if they're on a script, that's creating major problems because it means they're coming out to no script. If it's a Friday, like happened last week, 10 to 5, they're going all weekend with no script. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to guess what. Yeah. If we can't ease their pain, they will go and ease their own pain.
Yeah, that's what we do, self-medicate, isn't it?
Yes, so it hasn't been really fully researched properly and looked at properly before the core governments have made these decisions and the impact it's having. Because obviously, heroin, crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. There seems to be a link. Alex, anything else you'd like to say? Any final thoughts?
Do you know what? I just want to say thank you to you guys. I just feel really grateful for your energy and time and input. For me, I feel like
You belong.
Well, no, but I've got no choice to do this recovery thing and to do that. But you do, and it's it's inspiring. I feel excited and energized again, and I just want to
It was lovely to hear David say that he feels this is the start of things. I mean, we've been at it for quite a while. But you feel we're on the cusp of something like this.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. I know that, and I know the system.
Well, we'd love plenty more Eternals kind of hubs kicking up around the UK, and I know North Wales would benefit from more North Wales recovery communities as well, up this end especially. Mm. Yeah, the model is fantastic, and the people who run it are passionate and they care. Right, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of this, and thank you for tuning into Eternal Media's Recovery Hub.